The ship's lighting had cycled twice since she first settled into the chair, or perhaps 3 times. She had not been counting. Time felt softer out here, less insistent. The boundaries between one cycle and the next had begun to blur in a way that did not trouble her. Ari sat with her hands folded loosely in her lap, her gaze directed outward through the wide viewport. The stars were there, as they always were. Bright points scattered across the darkness, each one steady and clear. They did not flicker the way they had when seen from Earth, filtered through layers of atmosphere. Here, they simply glowed, constant, patient. She had looked at them many times now, and each time she noticed something she had not noticed before. Not because the stars had changed, but because her attention shifted, settled into different places, found new ways of seeing what had always been there. Today, she found herself noticing the spaces between them, the darkness, not the stars themselves, but what lay around them, the vast, quiet emptiness that separated one point of light from another. It stretched in all directions, deeper than she could comprehend, holding the stars apart with a patience that felt almost deliberate. Empty space. Or was it? She let the question sit without urgency. She did not need an answer immediately. She was simply noticing, wondering, letting her attention rest on something that had always been there, but had never quite held her focus in this way before. The spaces between the stars were not small, they were enormous, distances so vast that light itself took years to cross them. She had thought about that before, the way light traveled, patient and tireless, carrying information across the void. But now she thought about what the light moved through, the emptiness it crossed. Was it truly empty? She shifted slightly in her chair, adjusting her position. The movement was small, unhurried. Her body felt light in the low gravity, held gently by the seat beneath her. The ship hummed its familiar hum in the background, a sound she barely noticed anymore unless she chose to. Her gaze drifted from one star to another, tracing invisible lines between them. Constellations, she supposed, though not ones anyone on Earth would recognize. Just patterns her mind created from proximity and chance. 3 stars in a loose triangle, 2 more forming a line. Another cluster further off, faint but distinct. And between them all, the darkness. It was not frightening. It was not cold in the way that made her feel alone. It was simply there, present, quiet. She thought about Earth, though the thought came without weight. Earth was gone from view now, had been for some time. Too far, too faint, lost among the countless other points of light that filled the sky. She could not see it anymore, but she knew it was there. Somewhere behind her, still turning, still orbiting the sun, still holding the people and places she had known. Invisible, but real. The idea settled over her gently, that something could be there without being seen. That absence from view did not mean absence from existence. She wondered how much of the universe was like that, how much existed beyond what her eyes could reach, beyond what light could carry to her. The stars she saw were the visible things, the obvious things. They announced themselves with their glow, their heat, their light traveling across unimaginable distances to touch her eyes. But what about everything else? What about the things that did not shine, that did not reflect, that simply were quietly without needing to be noticed? She did not know, and she found that comforting in a strange way. The idea that there was more, that the universe was fuller than it appeared, that the darkness between the stars was not nothing, but something she simply could not see. Her breath moved in and out, slow and steady. She had not thought about it consciously, but now that she noticed, she felt the rhythm of it, the gentle rise and fall of her chest, the coolness of the air as it entered, the warmth as it left. Breathing was like that too, she thought, invisible but essential. She could not see the air, she could not hold it or touch it in any meaningful way, but it was there. It filled the ship. It moved through the ventilation systems, cycled and filtered and returned to her, sustaining her without needing acknowledgement. She trusted it. She did not question whether it was there. She simply breathed, and the air was there to be breathed. Perhaps the universe worked that way too, full of things she could not see but could trust to be there, supporting, holding, quietly doing the work that allowed everything else to exist. She let her gaze soften, no longer focusing on individual stars, but taking in the whole. The field of light and darkness, the presence and the absence, both equally real, both equally part of what she was looking at. It was beautiful in a way that did not demand anything from her. She did not need to understand it. She did not need to name it or measure it or explain it. She could simply sit here and notice, and let the noticing be enough. The stars glowed. The darkness held them. And she was here, watching, held by her own invisible things. The ship's gravity, gentle and artificial, the air she breathed, the systems working quietly in the walls around her, keeping her safe and warm and alive. So much of what mattered could not be seen. She had always known that in a vague, intellectual way, but sitting here, looking out at the stars and the spaces between them, she felt it more clearly. The universe was not just what shone, it was also what held the shining things in place. Her hands rested lightly in her lap. Her breath continued its quiet rhythm. The ship hummed. Everything was as it should be. She did not need to see everything to trust that it was there. After a while, she rose from the chair, slowly, carefully, and made her way back through the dim corridors toward the galley, where she could prepare something warm and simple, a small ritual to anchor the cycle. Chapter 2: Held Without Touch. She had found something on the navigation display that held her attention. Not a problem, not an alert, just an image the ship's systems had compiled from data gathered over the past cycles, a representation of what lay beyond the viewport in ways her eyes could not see directly. Ari stood at the console, her hand resting lightly on its edge. The screen glowed softly in the dim control area, showing a wide field of stars rendered in pale blues and whites. But these were not photographs. They were something else. A map, perhaps. A sketch of structure. She tilted her head slightly, studying it. The image showed a region of space much larger than what she could see through the window. Hundreds of stars, thousands maybe, each one represented by a small point of light. But what caught her eye was not the stars themselves. It was the way they were arranged. They formed a shape. Not a precise shape, not a geometric pattern, but a loose, flowing structure, like a river seen from above or a wisp of cloud stretched thin. The stars clustered more densely in some areas, thinned out in others, creating lanes and curves that wound through the darkness. A spiral. She recognized it vaguely. She had seen images like this before during her training. Galaxies viewed from a distance, the way stars gathered into vast rotating systems, spinning slowly over millions of years. But this was not a distant galaxy. This was here, close enough that the ship's instruments could map it. Close enough that some of these stars, perhaps many of them, were the same ones she could see through the observation window. She touched the screen lightly, adjusting the view. The image shifted, rotating slightly, showing the structure from a different angle. The spiral became more pronounced. She could see how the stars moved together, how they formed arms that curved outward from a denser center. It was beautiful, but it was also strange. She had always thought of stars as separate things, individual points of light scattered randomly across the void, but this image suggested something different. It suggested order, connection. The stars were not just near each other by chance. They were part of something larger, a structure, a system, and they stayed together. That was what struck her most. The spiral held its shape. The stars did not drift apart, did not scatter into randomness. They orbited. They moved in smooth, coordinated paths, maintaining the pattern over vast stretches of time. But why? She let the question settle without urgency. She was not looking for an immediate answer, just noticing, wondering. Stars moved through space. She knew that. Everything moved, but movement required something to move around or something to pull toward. Gravity, she supposed. The stars attracted each other, held each other in place through the gentle tug of mass across distance. But was that enough? She studied the image more closely. The spiral was loose, delicate. The stars were far apart, unimaginably far. The distances between them were so vast that their gravity, their mass, seemed too small to account for the structure she was looking at. And yet, the structure was there. The stars moved together. They held their shape. They did not fly apart. Something was holding them. She thought about the spaces between the stars again, the emptiness she had noticed earlier. Was it truly empty? Or was there something there, something she could not see, something that did not shine, that kept the stars from drifting away from each other? It felt like a strange idea, but it also felt true in a way she could not quite name. She thought about her own body, standing here at the console. She did not float away. She stayed in place, her feet resting lightly on the floor, held by the ship's gentle, artificial gravity. She could not see the gravity. She could not touch it or hold it in her hand, but it was there, acting on her, keeping her grounded. Perhaps the stars were the same, held by something invisible, something patient and constant, doing its work without needing to be seen. She stepped back from the console, her hand trailing across its smooth surface. The image remained on the screen, glowing softly, the spiral of stars moving together, held in place by something she could not name. It was not unsettling, it was comforting in a way. To think that the universe had structure, that things were held together not by chance, but by something real and persistent. Even if she could not see it, even if she did not fully understand it. She thought about the air in the ship again, the way it surrounded her, invisible and essential. She could not see it, but she trusted it. She breathed it without question, knowing it was there. Perhaps the universe worked the same way, full of invisible supports, quiet forces that shaped and guided and held without announcing themselves, without needing acknowledgement. Her breath moved in and out, slow and steady. The ship hummed around her. The stars on the screen glowed in their spiral pattern, patient and beautiful. She did not need to see what held them. She just needed to notice that they were held. And they were. The spiral turned slowly over time she could not measure. The stars moved together, guided by something unseen, and she stood here, watching, held by her own invisible things. It was enough. After a while, she dimmed the display and made her way back through the corridors, her steps light and unhurried, toward the small recreation area where she could sit quietly and let the cycle continue, soft and steady. Chapter 3: The Shape of Motion. She had returned to the observation window. The stars were still there, as they always were. Steady points of light scattered across the darkness, each one burning quietly in its own place. She had looked at them so many times now that they felt familiar, like faces she had come to know without needing to name. Ari settled into the chair, her body relaxing into its gentle hold. Her hands rested in her lap. Her breathing was slow and even. There was nowhere else she needed to be. She let her gaze drift across the viewport, not focusing on any single star, but taking in the field of them, the overall pattern, the way they spread across the dark in clusters and streams, dense in some areas, sparse in others. They looked still, fixed in place, but she knew they were not. Everything moved. She had thought about that before. The stars, the galaxies, the vast systems of light and matter that filled the universe. All of it in motion, all of it turning and drifting and traveling through space at speeds she could not feel or imagine. But the motion was not chaotic. That was what stayed with her now. The motion had shape. She thought about the spiral she had seen on the navigation display, the way the stars curved together, forming arms that swept outward from a center. They moved, but they moved together. They kept their pattern. They did not scatter. It was like water, she thought, water flowing down a river, each drop moving, but all of them moving in the same direction, guided by the shape of the land beneath them. The current held them together, kept them from spreading out into randomness. But what was the current here? What shaped the motion of stars? She did not know, but she could see the result, the smoothness of it, the way the stars followed paths that bent and curved in gentle arcs, as though tracing lines drawn by something patient and deliberate. She shifted her attention to a small cluster of stars near the center of her view. 4 or 5 of them, close enough together that they seemed to form a loose group. She had noticed them before, though she had not thought much about them. Just another pattern among many. But now she wondered, were they moving together? Were they bound to each other in some way, held by the same invisible force that kept the larger spiral intact? She could not see their motion, not directly. They appeared still, frozen in place like everything else. But over time, days, weeks, years, they would shift. They would travel along their paths, orbiting some common point, or drifting in coordinated ways she could not predict. The motion was too slow to see, but it was there. She thought about the ship. It was moving too, though she could not feel it, traveling through space at speeds that would have seemed impossible on Earth. And yet, inside the vessel, everything felt still. She sat in her chair, her body at rest, while the ship carried her forward through the dark. Motion and stillness were not opposites. She was still inside the ship. The ship moved through space, the stars moved through their own paths, and all of it was true at the same time. She let her breath settle in and out, the rhythm steady and automatic. The stars moved in their slow, patient orbits. They had been moving for so long she could not imagine it. Millions of years, more, long before she was born, long before Earth had formed, and they would continue moving long after she was gone, following paths that stretched far into the future. But the paths did not wander. They did not spiral outward into chaos. They held their shape. That required something, some force, some presence that kept the stars from drifting apart, something that pulled them gently, constantly, shaping their motion without disrupting it. She did not need to name it, she just needed to notice it. The stars moved together because something held them. The spiral kept its form because something shaped it. And that something was patient, quiet, content to do its work without announcing itself. She thought about her own motion, the way she moved through the ship, walking down corridors, her feet touching the floor with each step. The floor held her. The ship's gravity, gentle and artificial, kept her from floating away. She did not think about it most of the time. She simply walked, and the floor was there to meet her. It was the same with the stars, she thought. They moved through space, and something was there to guide them, to hold them in their paths, to keep them from scattering into the void. She could not see what held them, but she could see the result, the smooth, coordinated motion, the stability, the pattern that persisted across unimaginable stretches of time. It was beautiful, and it was reassuring. The universe was not random. It was not fragile. It had structure, and that structure was held in place by something real and constant, even if it remained invisible. She let her gaze soften, her eyes half closed, still looking out at the stars but no longer focused on any particular point, just taking in the field of light, the presence of it, the quiet beauty of motion that held its shape. Her breath moved in and out. The ship hummed softly around her. The stars glowed in their slow, eternal dance. Everything moved, but nothing scattered. Everything was held. She felt a quiet appreciation settle over her, Not awe, exactly, not wonder in the way that demanded expression, just a calm, gentle acknowledgement. The universe worked this way. Stars moved together because something shaped their motion, and she was here, watching, held by her own invisible supports. It was enough. After a time she did not measure. She rose from the chair and made her way back through the corridors, her steps light and steady, toward her quarters where she could rest before the cycle turned again. Chapter 4: What the Instruments Suggest. She had been reviewing the ship's logs when she noticed the notation. Not an alert, not a warning, just a small entry in the data stream, something the instruments had recorded and filed away without urgency. A measurement, an observation about the region of space the ship was passing through. Ari sat at the console, her hand resting lightly on its edge. The screen glowed softly, showing lines of text and simple graphs. Nothing complicated, nothing that required interpretation or action, just information presented calmly, waiting to be noticed. She touched the screen, calling up more detail. The ship's sensors had been tracking motion, not the ship's own motion, but the motion of things around it. Stars mostly, their positions, their velocities, the paths they followed through space. It was routine data collection, the kind of thing the systems did constantly in the background, building a map of where the ship was and what surrounded it. But something in the data had caught the instrument's attention. The stars were moving in ways that did not quite match what their visible mass suggested they should. The paths they followed, the smooth, coordinated orbits she had been observing, required more pull, more presence, more something to account for the shape of their motion. The instrument suggested an explanation. She read the notation slowly, her eyes tracing the simple language the ship's systems used to describe what they had found. There was mass here, significant mass, but it was not visible. It did not shine. It did not reflect light. It simply was, exerting its gentle influence on everything around it, shaping the motion of stars without announcing itself. The notation called it dark matter. She let the words settle without urgency. Dark matter, not light, not matter she could see or touch or point to, just something unseen that filled the spaces between stars, patient and constant, doing the work of holding and guiding. It was not a new idea. She had encountered the term before during her training, a concept scientists had proposed to explain observations like these, matter that existed but did not interact with light, invisible scaffolding that shaped the structure of galaxies, that kept stars from flying apart, that provided the mass needed for the universe to work the way it did. But reading about it and seeing the evidence here, in the data the ship had collected from this region of space, felt different. It made it real. She leaned back slightly, her gaze drifting from the screen to the viewport beyond. The stars were still there, glowing softly in the dark. They looked the same as they always had. But now she knew, or rather the instruments had confirmed, that they were not alone. They moved through something that surrounded them, supported them, shaped their paths without needing to be seen. She thought about the emptiness she had noticed in the first cycle, the vast spaces between stars. She had wondered if they were truly empty, and now the instruments were suggesting an answer. They were not empty. They were full of something quiet and patient, something that did not shine but was there nonetheless. Dark matter. She did not need to understand how it worked. The instruments did not explain mechanisms. They simply reported what was: mass without light, presence without visibility, influence without interaction. It was enough to know it was there. She thought about the air in the ship again. Invisible, essential, trusted. She breathed it without question, even though she could not see it. The ship's systems told her it was there, and she believed them. Perhaps this was the same. The instruments told her the dark matter was there, shaping the motion of stars, and she could believe them. She did not need to see it to know it was real. She touched the screen again, dimming the display slightly. The notation remained, glowing softly. A simple statement, an acknowledgement of presence. The universe was fuller than it appeared. Most of what existed could not be seen. And that was not troubling. It was just true. She let her breath move in and out, slow and steady. The ship hummed around her. The stars glowed in the viewport, held and guided by forces she could not observe directly, but could trust were there. Dark matter, patient, supportive, quietly structuring the universe without needing acknowledgement. She appreciated that. The idea that the universe did not need to announce itself, that it could do its work invisibly, content to remain unseen as long as the work was done. It reminded her of the ship, the way systems worked in the walls and floors, filtering air and cycling water and regulating temperature, all without needing her attention. She trusted them. She did not need to see them to know they were there. The universe worked the same way, full of invisible supports, quiet structures that held everything together. She sat there for a while, her hand resting on the console, her thoughts calm and unhurried. The data glowed softly on the screen. The stars glowed softly in the dark, and between them, unseen but real, the dark matter held its quiet watch. After a time, she rose and made her way through the corridors toward the galley, where she could prepare something warm, a small ritual to mark the cycle's gentle turning. Chapter 5. Most of what exists. She had been thinking about proportion, not in a precise way, not in terms of numbers or measurements, just the general sense of how much of one thing existed compared to another, the relationship between what she could see and what she could not. Ari sat in the small recreation area, her hands resting lightly on her knees. The ship was quiet around her. The hum of the systems had faded into background texture, barely noticeable unless she chose to listen. The lights were dim, casting soft shadows across the walls. She thought about the stars. When she looked out the observation window, they filled her view. Hundreds of them, thousands, bright points scattered across the darkness, each one announcing itself with its glow. They dominated the scene. They were what her eyes found, what her attention settled on. But now she knew they were not most of what was there. The dark matter, the unseen presence the instruments had confirmed, filled the spaces between the stars. And there was more of it than there were stars. Much more. She had read the notation carefully, absorbing what the ship's data suggested. The visible matter, the stars, the gas, the dust, all the things that shone or reflected light made up only a small fraction of what existed in this region. Most of the mass was dark, invisible, present but unseen. It was strange to think about that what she saw was the exception, not the rule, that the universe was mostly made of things she could not observe directly, but it was also reassuring. She thought about fullness, about presence. The universe was not empty. It was full of structure and substance and quiet support. Most of it simply chose not to shine. Or perhaps it was not a choice. Perhaps it was just the way things were. Some matter interacted with light, reflected it, emitted it, made itself visible. And some matter did not. It existed in a different way, touching the universe through gravity alone, shaping and holding without needing to be seen. She shifted slightly in her seat, adjusting her position. The chair held her gently. The floor beneath her feet was solid, dependable. She did not think about it most of the time, but now she noticed. The ship was full of things she did not see. Structural beams hidden behind panels, wiring tucked into walls, systems working in spaces she never entered. The visible parts, the corridors, the observation deck, the galley, were just the surface. Underneath, invisible but essential, the ship's structure held everything together. Perhaps the universe worked the same way. What she saw, the stars, the galaxies, the light, was just the surface. And underneath, invisible but essential, the dark matter provided the structure that held everything in place. She let her breath move in and out, slow and steady. The idea settled over her without weight. It did not trouble her. It did not make the universe feel empty or unknowable. If anything, it made it feel more complete, more whole. Seeing was not the same as knowing. She had known that in other contexts. She could not see the air, but she knew it was there. She could not see the ship's gravity, but she felt its effects. She could not see time passing, but she experienced its flow. The universe was full of things that existed beyond sight, and that was fine. She did not need to see everything to trust that it was there. She thought about the proportion again, the relationship between the visible and the invisible. If most of what existed was dark matter, then the stars, beautiful and bright as they were, represented only a small part of the whole. They were not the foundation. They were not what held the structure together. They were passengers, held and guided by something larger. It was humbling in a gentle way. The stars seemed so significant when she looked at them, so commanding. But they were just one piece of a much larger system, a piece that happened to shine, that happened to catch the eye, but not the piece that did the most important work. The dark matter did that work, quietly, patiently, without needing recognition. She appreciated that, the idea that the universe did not prioritize visibility, that it valued function over appearance, that it built itself on invisible foundations and let the visible things rest on top, supported and safe. She let her gaze drift around the small room. The walls were smooth and pale, reflecting the dim light. The bench she sat on was simple, functional. The screen on the wall was dark, powered down. Everything here was what it appeared to be. Nothing hidden, nothing invisible, but the ship itself, the larger system this room existed within, was full of hidden things, and she trusted them. She did not need to see the filtration system to know her air was clean. She did not need to see the water recyclers to know her water was safe. She simply lived here, and the unseen systems did their work. The universe was the same. She lived in it, moved through it, watched its visible parts with appreciation, and the unseen parts, the dark matter, the invisible scaffolding, did their work without needing her attention. It was enough to know they were there. She thought about proportion one more time. Most of what existed could not be seen, and that was not a loss. It was not something missing. It was simply the way things were. The universe was full, fuller than it appeared, and she was held by all of it, the visible and the invisible, the shining and the dark. Her breath continued its rhythm. The ship hummed softly. The dim light filled the small room with gentle presence. She did not need to see everything. She just needed to trust that it was there, doing its work, holding her and the stars and everything else in place. And it was. After a while, she rose and made her way through the corridors toward the observation deck, where she could sit with the stars in the darkness, both equally real, both equally part of what surrounded her. Chapter 6: Moving Through What Holds You. She had been walking through the ship's corridors for some time now, not going anywhere in particular, not moving toward a task or a destination, just walking, letting her body move through the familiar spaces, her feet touching the floor with each light step, her hand occasionally trailing along the smooth wall. The low gravity made every movement feel effortless. She barely had to push off the floor to propel herself forward. Her steps were more like gentle bounces, her body floating slightly between each contact with the ground. It was a sensation she had grown accustomed to, but she still noticed it when she paid attention. The lightness, the ease. She moved past the galley, past the small recreation area, past the entrance to her quarters. The corridors were quiet. The lights were dim, casting soft shadows that moved with her as she walked. The ship hummed its constant, patient hum in the background. She thought about support, not in an abstract way, but in a physical, felt way. The way her feet met the floor, the way the floor held her, kept her from drifting up toward the ceiling. The way the ship's artificial gravity wrapped around her, gentle and constant, giving her body something to rest against. She could not see the gravity. She could not point to it or touch it. But she felt its effects with every step. It shaped how she moved. It guided her body through space. It held her without announcing itself, like the dark matter, she thought. The comparison came naturally, without force. The dark matter filled the space around stars, shaping their motion, holding them in their orbits. She moved through the ship, and the ship's gravity shaped her motion, held her in place. Both were invisible. Both were essential. Both did their work without needing to be seen. She paused near one of the ventilation panels and placed her hand flat against the wall beside it. The surface was cool and smooth beneath her palm, solid, real, but the wall was not what held her here. The floor beneath her feet was not by itself what kept her grounded. It was the gravity, the invisible presence that pulled her gently downward, that gave her body weight and direction. Without it, she would float, drift, lose her sense of up and down. But the gravity was there, patient, constant, doing its work. She continued walking, her steps light and unhurried. She passed through a junction where two corridors met, turned left, moved deeper into the ship's living quarters. The route was familiar. She had walked it many times. She thought about the stars again, moving through space held by the dark matter's gravity. Did they feel it? Did they experience the pull, the guidance, the shaping influence? Probably not. Stars were not conscious. They did not notice or wonder. They simply moved, following the paths their motion and the surrounding mass created for them. But she could notice, she could wonder, and in wondering, she could appreciate the parallel. She moved through the ship, held by its systems. The stars moved through space, held by the dark matter. Both were supported, both were guided. Neither needed to see what held them. She reached the end of the corridor and turned back, retracing her path. Her hand trailed along the wall again, her fingertips brushing the smooth surface. The texture was faint, barely noticeable, but it was there. A subtle reminder that the wall was solid, real, present. She could not see through the wall. She could not see the structure behind it, the beams and supports that held the ship's shape, that kept the corridors from collapsing, that maintained the integrity of the vessel. But she trusted they were there. She walked through the ship without worrying whether the walls would hold. She simply moved, and the structure supported her. The dark matter was like that too. Invisible structure, quiet support. She moved through the universe, and the dark matter held it together around her, shaping the motion of stars, maintaining the architecture of galaxies. She did not need to see it. She just needed to trust it was doing its work. And it was. She thought about interaction, the way some things touched directly, her hand on the wall, her feet on the floor, and the way some things acted at a distance, through forces she could not see. Gravity was like that. It reached across space, pulling objects toward each other without needing physical contact. The dark matter acted the same way. It did not collide with stars. It did not block their light or obstruct their paths. It simply exerted its influence through gravity, shaping motion without interference. Presence without interaction. She found that comforting. The idea that something could support you without intruding, that it could hold you without touching you, that it could shape your path without demanding your attention. The ship's gravity did that for her. The dark matter did that for the stars, and both allowed motion to continue, smooth and uninterrupted, guided but not constrained. She passed through the galley again, her steps still light, her breathing still steady. The air moved gently around her, cycled and filtered, invisible but essential. She breathed it without thinking, trusting it was there. Everything that held her was invisible. The gravity, the air, the systems working in the walls, the structure hidden behind panels. all of it unseen, all of it essential. She was held by things she could not see, and that was fine. She did not need to see them to know they were real. She just needed to move, and they would be there, supporting her, guiding her, doing their quiet work. Her body felt light as she walked, not weightless, but unburdened. The ship held her, the systems cared for her, and she could simply exist here, moving through spaces that were safe and stable, trusting the invisible supports that made it all possible. The stars did the same, moving through space, held by the dark matter, trusting the invisible scaffolding that kept the universe from collapsing into chaos. It was a kind of faith, she thought, not religious faith, but practical faith. The faith that came from experience, from noticing patterns, from seeing that things held together even when you could not see what held them. She had that faith, and it made the universe feel less empty, less uncertain. It made it feel full of quiet supports, patient structures, invisible hands that held without gripping. She moved, and she was held. That was enough. After a while, she made her way back to her quarters where she could rest, her body still light, still supported, still held by forces she trusted but could not see. Chapter 7. Quiet Architecture. She had returned to the observation deck. The lights were dim the way she preferred them, just enough to see her hands, the outline of the chair, the edge of the viewport. Everything else was darkness and stars. Ari settled into the chair, her body relaxing into its familiar hold. Her hands rested loosely in her lap. Her breathing was slow and even. There was nowhere else she needed to be. The stars filled the window. She had looked at them so many times now. Each time they appeared the same. Steady points of light scattered across the dark, but she knew now that they were not scattered randomly. They had shape, structure. They moved together, held by something she could not see. The dark matter. She did not need to think about it in detail. She just needed to notice the way the stars formed patterns, the way they curved and clustered, the way they stayed together across unimaginable stretches of time. It was like looking at a building, she thought, not the walls or the rooms, but the structure underneath, the beams and supports that held everything in place. You did not see them when you walked through the building, but they were there, patient, constant, doing their work. The universe had that kind of structure, invisible architecture, built slowly, patiently over time she could not imagine. She let her gaze soften, not focusing on any single star but taking in the field of them, the overall impression, light and darkness woven together, both part of the same system, both necessary. The stars glowed, the dark matter held them, and together they formed something larger, something stable, something that persisted. She thought about slowness again, the way everything moved so gradually, stars drifting through their orbits, galaxies turning, the dark matter shaping motion across millions of years, billions. Nothing rushed, nothing needed to. The universe built itself slowly, layer by layer, structure by structure, each piece fitting into place at its own pace, guided by forces that never hurried. She found that comforting, the idea that the universe was not fragile, that it was built to last, that its foundations were strong and patient and real. even if invisible. Her breath moved in and out, slow, steady. The ship hummed softly around her, its own architecture holding her, keeping her safe, doing its quiet work. She thought about the way things fit together, the ship and the stars, the gravity and the dark matter, the visible and the invisible, all of it connected, all of it part of the same patient system. Nothing was alone, nothing drifted without support. She let her eyes close for a moment, then open again. The stars remained, glowing softly, held in their places by forces she trusted but could not see. The darkness between them was not empty. It was full of quiet structure, full of patient presence. She did not need to name it again. She just needed to sit here and notice the way things held together, the way motion had shape, the way the universe built itself slowly and carefully without needing acknowledgement. It was beautiful, not in a way that demanded attention, but in a way that invited rest, invited trust, invited her to simply be here, held and safe, part of something larger. Her breath continued its rhythm. In, out, slow. The stars glowed, the darkness held them, and she watched and rested and let the quiet architecture of the universe surround her, steady and patient and real. Everything moved, but everything held its shape. Everything was built slowly, patiently, and she was part of it, held, supported, safe. After a time she did not measure, she rose from the chair, slowly, gently, and made her way back through the dim corridors toward her quarters, where rest was waiting, soft and welcoming. Chapter 8. Enough. Her quarters were dark, just the faint glow near the doorway, soft, distant. Everything else was shadow. Ari lay on her sleeping pad, the blanket pulled up over her shoulders, light, warm, familiar. Her body had settled, her muscles had let go. Her breath moved slowly in and out without effort. The ship hummed quietly, always there. She did not need to listen. It was simply part of the space, part of the stillness. Her eyes were closed, or perhaps open. The darkness was the same. She noticed her breath. In, out, slow. She did not count it, just felt it, the rhythm, the way her body knew. The blanket was soft, the pillow cool. Her hair, still braided, rested against her shoulder. Everything was still. The ship carried her forward. She did not feel it, did not need to. The stars glowed somewhere, held by what she could not see, and she rested. Her thoughts had slowed, drifted without shape, just soft impressions, the hum, the coolness, the warmth, in, out. Her breath continued, steady, slow. She let go of the cycle, let it fade. There was nothing she needed to do, nothing to think about. Just this, just breathing, just here. The darkness was soft, it did not press. She felt her body sinking, not falling, settling. The ship hummed, her breath moved, in, out. Everything was still. The stars held their places, the dark matter held them, patient, quiet, and she was held too. The blanket, the air, the ship, all of it invisible, all of it there, in, out. Her body felt heavy, soft. The boundary had thinned, she drifted along it. Time passed, or did not. The ship carried her. The universe carried her, and she let herself be carried. Her breath slowed, in, out. The hum continued, quiet. The darkness held her. Everything was still. She was still. The stars glowed, patient. Everything moved, slowly, and she rested. Her breath, in, out, soft, slow, still. The ship hummed, the darkness gentle. Everything continued, quietly, slowly, without needing her, and she let go, softly, into stillness, into rest. The ship moved forward. The stars glowed, held, quiet, still, enough.